Imagine waking up to be told you stabbed your boyfriend to death and you have absolutely no idea. Bryn Specker was a 27-year-old woman from California. It was 2 a.m. on Memorial Day 2018. She'd been dating 28-year-old Chad O'Meara for a couple of weeks. The pair had been hanging out a lot since initially meeting at a dog park. Chad was 26 and worked as an accountant and an amateur boxer. On the night in question, the couple were at his apartment in Thousand Oaks. They decided to smoke some substances together and had no idea that the decision would change their lives forever. Bryn is said to have gone into what is called substance-induced psychosis. She ended up doing just about the most horrific thing you could imagine. She grabbed a knife and stabbed Chad in a frenzied attack. She ended up stabbing him over 100 times. She was reportedly screaming hysterically while stabbing him and herself in the neck. She then, and trigger warning here for animals, she then stabbed her pet dog, an Alaskan Husky. Emergency services raced to the scene and there was blood absolutely everywhere. Bryn was still screaming and officers had to hit her with a baton and also taser her in order to get the knife out of her hand and subdue her. Her boyfriend Chad was pronounced dead at the scene. Bryn was rushed to hospital where she underwent life-saving surgery. When she regained consciousness, she had no idea what had happened. She was told she had killed her own boyfriend and also stabbed her dog. Thankfully, her dog did survive the attack. In court, Bryn claimed that Chad had actually been aggressive and intimidating towards her during the time that they'd known each other. She stated that he had pressured her into smoking the substances that night. In a controversial conclusion to the case, she was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. She was given 2 years probation and 100 hours community service.
Welcome to Saw Traps that I would survive because I have at least 2 brain cells to rub together. And today we're talking about the needle pit from Saw 2. This trap is really simple. It's just a giant pit of needles where they're trying to dig all the way to the bottom of it to find a key. Obviously, you don't want to get stuck with any of the needles because Jigsaw does specify that these are used sharps. The characters end up having an argument about who is supposed to be going into the pit. And that's when one of the characters, Xavier, grabs Amanda and forcibly throws her down into the pit. Amanda gets stuck dozens and dozens of times by needles, but she does eventually find the key so that way they can get the antidote from the safe. However, they didn't have enough time, there was too much panic, too much chaos going on, they can't get the antidote. What I would have done, if you look around this room, there's so many blankets and there's even a mattress in this room. They could have layered the blankets on top of the mattress and slid it into a part of the pit. That way none of the characters have to be kneeling or standing on the sharps. Also, every other character in this scene has shoes. Amanda's the only one without shoes. They could have used the shoes and put them on their hands in order to dig through all of the needles until they found the key.
Nobody should ever own a monkey. And nothing proves that more than the true story of events that took place on February 16th, 2009 in Stamford, Connecticut, involving a chimpanzee named Travis. Sandra Harold bought Travis when he was just 3 days old for $50,000 after losing her and her husband Jerome's only child in a car accident. She would go on to raise him as her own son, and so Travis learned how to dress himself. He would wait by the door every day at the same time for when the ice cream truck came by. He even knew how to work a computer and smartphone to pull up his favorite movies and TV shows to entertain himself. But on this particular February day, Travis was not exactly acting like himself, and it's believed that this is due to the fact that a medication that, let's just say, rhymes with Schmanex was found in his system. So Travis had suddenly stolen Sandra's car keys and escaped their house and was acting frantic in the driveway. Sandra tried and tried to calm him down and get him back in the house, but she just couldn't. And so, not knowing what else to do, she called her longtime friend Sharla Nash over to the house to assist with calming down Travis. And Sharla was usually pretty good at this, but it's believed that this didn't work so well this time because Sharla had recently dyed and cut her hair and may have been unrecognizable to Travis, but no one really knows. So as Sharla arrived and waved around Travis's favorite Tickle Me Elmo toy, something in Travis snapped. What happened next is nothing short of a living nightmare. Travis, who experts claim would have had the strength of 5 full-grown, well-built men by the age he was at this time, threw Charlotte to the ground and stood over her before grabbing her head in his hands and sinking his large teeth into her face. So as Charlotte screamed, Travis ripped off her lips, eyelids, and nose. So at this point, Travis's owner, Sandra, grabs a shovel nearby and runs over to help her friend Charla and begins hitting Travis as hard as she can in the back over and over, but it is doing absolutely nothing to this rock-solid, fully grown chimpanzee. So she ran back into the house as Travis continued crushing Charla's facial structure at this point. She ultimately returned with a large kitchen knife and sank it as hard as she could into Travis's back 3 times before Travis finally stood up, turned around, and just glared directly at Sandra. And this terrified Sandra, and she felt, I'm going to be next. She just saw what happened to her friend, and this primal fear came over her, and all she could think to do was run right to her car nearby and lock herself inside. Travis then turns back to Charla and bites off her entire right hand. And so at this point, Sandra is inside the car calling 911 in what would be a chilling audio that has surfaced online and can easily be found. And as the shrieks of this frenzied chimpanzee can be heard in the background of this call, he would be done with the right hand and would move to her left hand and almost bite that completely off. When police finally arrived, they chased Travis around the police cruiser for a few minutes before ultimately opening fire 4 times and hitting Travis all 4 times. Travis then made his way back into the house, into his own bed, which they assumed was his safe space where he felt comfort, and passed away. This is an actual photo of Charla Nash after the attack. After many, many surgeries, she would later appear on the Oprah Winfrey Show to tell her story, forever living with the after effects of that horrifying day.
If you haven't been able to hear about this yet, experts just gave us an official update about the massive nova explosion that's going to be happening in the sky soon, and literally everyone is going to be able to see this. Once in a lifetime nova explosion may create a new star in the night sky literally tonight. Scientists at NASA are predicting that over the next few months between right now and September, the world will bear witness to the formation of a new star and see it emerge in the night sky in a glorious display. If you want to make sure you don't miss this, make sure you add me, because I'm going to be giving you multiple reminders, and I'm also going to go live with my telescope so we can watch it together. So a nova is a really quick, brief explosion from a collapsing star known as a white dwarf, whereas a supernova is the catastrophic explosion of a large star. And the dwarf star does not break apart and continues to release material in a cycle that lasts for thousands of years, which is crazy. So basically this event is not going to be anywhere near as violent as a supernova, and also the Earth is really, really far away in a safe distance, so we're not going to be impacted. We're just going to be able to see it. If you want to make sure you don't miss this, I'm going to remind you as soon as it happens, so just add me and come back.
This looks like a sick headline from The Onion, but unfortunately it's very real. A child in Texas just confessed to a cold case murder that they committed at just 7 years old. And the way all of this finally came out is equally as chilling and bizarre. On April 11th of this year, the now 10-year-old boy got into a fight with another student on the school bus. And during this altercation, the boy threatened to kill the other student. So he's talking to school officials about this altercation when all of a sudden, he's like, by the way, I also shot and killed a man 2 years ago. And he starts giving details about the crime that only the killer would know. Let's go back to January 2022 when the murder occurred. The owner of Lazy J RV Park near Nixon was asked to do a welfare check on one of their residents. That resident was 33-year-old Brandon Raspberry, who hadn't shown up to work in a couple days. Ultimately, they would find Brandon deceased from a single gunshot wound to the head. Police basically had nothing to work with. Nothing was stolen. They interviewed everyone at the RV park. No one had a problem with Brandon, and he'd actually just moved in 4 days prior to being killed. So they can't go any further in their investigation, and the case goes cold for 2 years until this boy's confession. Apparently, the boy was visiting his grandfather who lived at the RV park. He'd actually never met Brandon, he'd just seen him walking around the park. And for seemingly no reason, this child decided to kill him. After grabbing a gun out of his grandfather's truck, he crept into Brandon's RV and shot him as he slept. Then put the gun back where he found it as if nothing ever happened. He also told police his grandfather pawned the gun, and they were able to locate that the very next day. So either the grandfather pawned it recently, or the murder weapon's just been sitting at a pawn shop since. The age of criminal culpability is 10 in Texas, so this boy won't face any charges for the murder he committed at age 7. However, he is being charged for the threat against another student. I really hope this kid is getting all the psychiatric help he needs, because he ultimately took a life, and seemingly has no remorse for it.
This is all the craziest stuff that happened on the news this month, but it's going to be simplified in 60 seconds. A new study has now revealed that nearly 80% of Americans actually consider fast food to be a luxury due to high prices. That's crazy. New York is now planning to build this U-shaped skyscraper, and it's so big that a plane can easily go through it. I don't know why they had to word it like that, but okay. NASA discovered a mysterious hole on the surface of Mars. Okay. So NASA is thinking that this hole could have been caused by an ancient volcano on Mars like a very long time ago, and they also think that it could possibly provide shelter for astronauts in the future. So that's cool. iPhone users are baffled after discovering a secret keyboard button that makes things so much easier. Basically, if you want to send more than one period, you just hold down on the period and it'll send 3 instead of 1. Not that big of a deal. This genius parking lot feature at a shopping center has people saying that it should be introduced everywhere. This is in Australia, by the way. And this is what it looks like. There's spaces in between so people can't park too close for people that don't know how to park. I give you these news roundups every day, so make sure you add me and come back to me tomorrow.
This Wisconsin elementary school teacher is being accused of having an inappropriate relationship with an 11-year-old boy. 24-year-old Madison Bergman has been arrested for making out with one of her 5th grade students only 3 months before her wedding. This came to light really recently after the boy's mother overheard him talking to his teacher on the phone. So obviously she confiscated his phone and read his text messages where he was discussing several encounters with his teacher where they were having inappropriate encounters during lunchtime or after school. Also in those texts, this adult told an 11-year-old boy how much she enjoyed him touching her. They also exchanged handwritten notes where she told him that she loved him more than anyone else in the world. Madison actually got the 11-year-old's phone number on a ski trip that she was invited on by the boy's parents. And that trip was actually during the same month that Madison got engaged to her boyfriend. They were set to be married this July, less than 3 months before she was arrested for cheating with a literal child. Obviously, the wedding is off. Madison has been barred from attending any school events, being on any school property, reaching out to any students, parents, or staff. This case is still ongoing, and Madison Bergman will appear in court on May 30th.
The most brutal in Saw 6 is the pound of flesh trap. Having to cut off your own body parts in a competitive trap where the person who cuts off the most weight gets to go free. And the least brutal in Saw 6 is going to the boomstick carousel. Obviously getting hit with a boomstick is not ideal, but it's buckshot, so I think you're gonna be over pretty quickly. The most brutal for Saw 5 is the pendulum trap. Not only is a giant sharp pendulum coming at your stomach Edgar Allan Poe style, but he is also having his hands completely pulverized by these little boxes. I was having a hard time deciding between the pendulum or the water cube for the most brutal, but in the end, I think there are so many ways that you could cheese this trap, so the pendulum is number 1 for Saw 5. The least brutal for this movie is the necktie trap. It's pretty much just simple decapitation. So again, my argument is this would be over pretty quickly, relatively painless. The most brutal trap in Saw 4 is the knife chair trap. His wrists and feet are nailed into the chair that he's sitting in, and the only way to escape before bleeding out is to push his face through this entire set of knives. I would say the least brutal from Saw 4 is the spine cutters. Mostly because severing your spine would rather stop feeling, and then also I think it would happen rather quickly.
Heal this side of my face or my other side of the face. Then he drugged me, bit off my heel, and he drugged me down a hill 30 feet.
In March of 2005, 62-year-old St. James Davis and his wife LaDonna were on their way to the Animal Haven Ranch to visit their former pet chimpanzee named Mo for his birthday. Mo had become nothing short of an actual son to the couple after LaDonna had been told by doctors she would never be able to have kids. As she wept into her husband's shoulder about this, St. James told her not to worry because they already had a child, and pointed at Mo, the chimpanzee. And so needless to say, the couple loved him as their own child very much, and Mo loved them as well. Although he would eventually be deemed a danger to the city by police, and would be taken away from them. And so as they arrived to this ranch where Mo was now at, and they placed all his little birthday gifts around this table they were going to have his birthday party at, and laid down this cake which was raspberry flavor inside. It was Mo's favorite. They had no idea that an employee had accidentally left open the chimpanzee cages, and one very angry and aggressive chimpanzee was coming around the corner right at that moment with its eyes locked on to LaDonna. Immediately, St. James sees this dangerous chimpanzee approaching his wife and begins running towards the both of them, but not before this chimpanzee was able to shove LaDonna to the ground and take her hand and bite off her thumb. But finally, St. James reaches them, and just as he does, he notices another second chimpanzee coming straight towards him, this one looking much larger and stronger even than the chimpanzee that was attacking LaDonna. And so he gets in between LaDonna and this first chimpanzee, seeing the second one coming towards him. They're both now closing in on him, and he braces himself and even lets out a scream of terror as he stands and awaits whatever is about to happen to him. In seconds, both chimpanzees jump onto him, one on his back, sinking its teeth into his face and crushing the bone structure of his eyebrow. Then it jammed its strong fingers into his eye socket and gouged one of his eyes. And from there it was an all-out mauling as both chimps tore him to shreds. His nose was bitten off of his face, his lips and teeth literally ripped out of his mouth, while the other chimpanzee bit off his fingers before moving to his buttocks and biting and ripping chunks out of his rear end. Ultimately, one of the chimps moved down to his private parts and tore them completely off of his body. Eventually, the ranch owner's son-in-law sees this and comes running out of the house with his revolver and fires a shot at the smaller chimpanzee, and it does absolutely nothing, as chimpanzees are known to have 4 to 7 times the strength of a grown man. And so he runs back into the house and gets his larger rifle and returns to the scene. He would find out that this larger rifle was powerful enough to put down both chimpanzees and stop the attack. When paramedics arrived, St. James was utterly unrecognizable. The couple would go on to recover together over the years before one day getting another piece of horrible news. Mo had escaped, and they would never see Mo again. After this, St. James said in an interview that the pain and suffering of the attack and even what he endured after this attack, the after effects, were nothing in comparison to the knowledge that they had lost their baby boy, Mo.
Meanwhile, Consuelo and the rest of the group were already back at her cabin just waiting for Antonia to arrive. At around 8:56 in the morning, Antonia texted her friend Consuelo with her location and asked her to come get her. When Consuelo checked the location, she realized that Antonia was only about a 3 to 5 minute walk away, so she just told Antonia to just walk back to the cabin. However, that's when Antonia told her no, that she needed to come get her because she had just been R-worded. Consuelo and her boyfriend Tomas head over to the location that Antonia sent, which led them to Martin's cabin. They find Antonia outside crying, wearing nothing but just Martin's sweater. They head back to Consuelo's cabin, and that's when Antonia reveals to them what happened. She says she doesn't really remember how Martin managed to get her outside of the nightclub, but that when they got to his cabin, he began to R-word her. Consuelo told Antonia that they needed to call the police and report this, but Antonia said no, that she felt embarrassed and she felt guilty because she had been drinking. She also didn't want her parents or her family and friends and the rest of the city to find out what happened to her. After this, the trip was obviously cut short and the group headed back to Temuco on September 19th. Antonia tried to move on, she continued to go to school, do her homework, she continued to be with her friends and family. But this was just such a difficult thing to try to get through alone, and she didn't want to tell her family what happened. Things got even more difficult when on October 12, 2019, Antonia received a message from her boyfriend Rodrigo, where he basically accused her of cheating on him with Martin. So long story short, Rodrigo had a friend named Carla, whose boyfriend was friends with Martin, and Martin had told him that he had hooked up with Antonia. So Rodrigo was mad. He was telling Antonia that she was a cheater and all of this stuff, and Antonia was like, no, listen, let me tell you the truth of what happened. I didn't cheat on you. I was R-worded by Martin. What's really disappointing is that Rodrigo did not believe Antonia. He began to call her these horrible names. He called her slurs. He called her a pig, a liar, all these terrible things. He even said, well, if you actually were R-worded, why didn't you go to the police? He was literally victim blaming, and this is someone that Antonia loves and someone that supposedly loves her back, yet he was treating her this way. Now, not only was Antonia being harassed by her boyfriend Rodrigo, but Martin also now began to message her, accusing her of being a liar and saying that he did not R-word her and that this was consensual. It all just became too much, and her family believes that Antonia truly felt like no one was going to believe her, and that is why the next day, on October 13th, she decided to take her own life. So, now that Antonia's family knew the truth of what happened to her before her death, they officially filed charges against Martin. During the investigation, 5 more victims came forward and said that Martin had also essayed them. In the end, Martin Pradenas was only sentenced to 14 years for the R-wording of Antonia and the 5 other victims. It's just really disturbing because Martin actually has a daughter and he has a sister, yet he was doing these horrible things to other people's sisters and other people's daughters. Throughout the trial, he basically denied everything, and it's even more annoying because his mom was kind of defending him and saying that Antonia was not resisting and that she wanted it. What happened to Antonia is truly terrible, and victim blaming just needs to end. This is why victims don't come forward, because they often feel guilty, they feel ashamed, and they feel like people aren't going to believe them and that people are going to blame them for something that they had no control over. It's just so unfair, and my thoughts and prayers go out to Antonia's family.
This man kidnapped and married his 4-year-old stepdaughter. At the time our story starts, this evil SOB, Franklin Floyd, has been in and out of prison multiple times for a range of crimes, including the SA of a 4-year-old girl. He's actually on the run. He's a fugitive with a new identity when he meets and marries this vulnerable single mom who has no idea who the man she just married really is. It was at this time that he kidnapped and ran off with her 4-year-old daughter, Suzanne, who she would never see again. Franklin and Suzanne would change their names and their location many times over the years, and Franklin would raise Suzanne as his daughter from the age of 4, but the entire time not only was he SAing Suzanne, but he was allowing his creepy effed up friends to SA her as well throughout her entire childhood. Despite all this abuse, Franklin was really confident of the control that he had over Suzanne. She had boyfriends, she had friends, she attended public school, and the entire time this evil, awful, dark secret never came out. In Suzanne's older teenage years, she got pregnant a handful of times. It's unknown who the biological father of most of her children are, because Franklin would sell them, like sell Suzanne's babies pretty much after she gave birth, but she was allowed to keep one child, a son she named Michael. When Suzanne started to get older, more and more people started to realize just how weird her dad really was. One of these people was actually one of Suzanne's friends and coworkers, a woman named Cheryl, who Franklin actually ended up unaliving, and I think he did this for multiple reasons. One, to kind of shut up Cheryl, and the other because he wanted to prove just what he could do to Suzanne, like keep her even more scared. But now Franklin has just committed this horrendous crime, so him and Suzanne have to skip town again, new identities, new life again. But he didn't want to present as father and daughter this time in this new life. He wanted to be husband and wife. So he actually forced Suzanne, the person that he's had in captivity since she was 4 years old, into marriage. At this point, Suzanne is 20 years old and her son Michael is 2 years old, and she's actually considering escaping Franklin. But before she's able to, Suzanne is hit by a car. And it was Franklin who did that. Franklin admitted to doing that. She's in bad shape, but she's in the hospital and she's going to survive. But then Suzanne mysteriously passed away in the hospital after her husband visited her. It breaks my heart that this doesn't have a happy ending for her, but it doesn't have a happy ending for her son Michael either. For multiple reasons, Michael, Suzanne's 2-year-old son, was removed from Franklin's custody after Suzanne passed away in the hospital, but Franklin doesn't like losing control. He doesn't like losing the people that he considers to be his. Franklin actually went into Michael's school, abducted Michael from school, and sadly Michael has never been seen again. But it is believed that Franklin unalived him as well. Franklin was arrested and sentenced to death, and very, very slowly his web of lies and secrets started to unravel. Years later in prison, Franklin finally started to admit to everything, including who Suzanne really was, because at this point they still didn't know who she was, only one of the fake names he gave her. So at least Suzanne's parents finally got some kind of closure and found out what happened to their daughter 40 years after she was first kidnapped. But Franklin never said where they could find Michael's remains so he could finally be put to rest, and we might never find out where Michael is because Franklin passed away in prison last year. If you're still here, thanks for watching. I know this was an incredibly long, confusing, and devastating case, and I didn't even scratch the surface. That's how wild this case is. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and let me know what case you'd want to see me cover next.
This is everything that happened on the news today, but it's going to be simplified in 60 seconds. A new study is now showing that one lazy day per week can actually reduce stress, lower blood pressure, and make you live longer. So that's crazy. California just officially got the world's first ever Tesla Cybertruck police vehicle. This is what it looks like. Can I be the only one that says that this literally looks terrifying? iPhone users are baffled after discovering a secret keyboard button that makes things so much easier. Basically, all you have to do is open up your keyboard, and whenever you click on the period, instead of clicking it, just hold it down and it'll let you put 3 instead of 1. I do not understand the point. Scientists have just revealed the reason as to why you see strange swirls and wave patterns whenever you close your eyes. This one's crazy. Can we all agree that we see this? Basically, he said that your eyes do not completely turn off in the dark, but instead they create very weak internal signals that mimic light, and that's what you're seeing. So experts are now claiming that they've actually discovered the wreckage of the missing Malaysia plane on Google Maps. Okay. Basically, this dude is saying that he's been searching for hours and hours and hours, and this is what he found. The search is continuing. I'll let you know if this is it. I don't know. I give you these news roundups every day, so make sure you add me and come back tomorrow. Also for an update on that.
In August of 2019, 21-year-old Jordan Lindsay was snorkeling with her mother Cammie near the Rose Islands in the Bahamas on day 3 of her family vacation, when suddenly she realized she was in horrifying danger. Her mother Cammie was snorkeling not far away from her when suddenly she heard her daughter yell, "Mom," and quickly turned to see what was happening. And to her surprise, she saw that Jordan was surrounded by dolphins and figured she just wanted her mother to see this kind of amazing and beautiful moment that was happening. But something wasn't right. Cammie noticed her daughter was kind of splashing and flailing around, and as she took a closer look, she felt this overwhelming sense of dread take her, a feeling no mother ever wants to experience. Jordan was surrounded by a school of tiger sharks, and at that moment, they all pounced on Jordan, taking chunks out of her. Cammie then screamed to her daughter to swim towards me, and as Jordan tried doing just that, Cammie realized that she couldn't. Why? Because her entire right arm had been ripped off. Cammie then forgets all about the danger and the fear of what she's about to head into and only thinks of the love for her daughter that she has as she scrambles through the water to save Jordan. And she reaches Jordan and begins punching and punching as hard as she can, hitting these sharks right in their noses until finally they retreat. She then begins swimming towards safety with her daughter, not very fast, but as fast as she can. And she hears her daughter's weakened voice say, "Mom, there's another shark." So Cammie whips her head around to see where is this other shark? How far away is it? And she does not have to look very hard, because right there is another tiger shark barreling straight towards the both of them. And in seconds, it is on them and bites off her daughter's entire lower leg. Cammie was now witnessing her child being ripped to pieces in real time right in front of her eyes. Something her husband would later say she still relives at nighttime. After this final attack, the sharks back off completely, and Cammie is able to slowly drag her daughter up to a nearby rock where she yells for help until finally help comes. A tour boat arrives, the same tour boat that was already fully booked, but Cammie's family paid some money to break the rules and allow their family to join the people on the boat at the last minute so that they could enjoy this snorkeling experience also. Later, once Jordan arrived at the hospital, she was immediately pronounced dead. Her family says she was full of life, hope, and had a bright future ahead of her.